What would you do if someone you knew walked down the street one moment, and the next, they were gone, claimed to have stepped into the year 1872, never to return? Was it madness, a trick of the mind, or did he really slip through time itself? At the heart of this mystery is a man named Samuel, though some accounts record his name differently depending on who tells the story. He wasn't a celebrity, a politician, or anyone with fame to his name. In fact, he was as ordinary as they come. A working man with a simple life, known in his community as dependable, steady, and not the type to attract attention. That's part of what makes this story so disturbing. It wasn't the tale of a dreamer or a trickster, but of someone people considered grounded in reality. Samuel lived quietly, surrounded by family and neighbors who knew his routines well. He had no history of wandering off, no record of mental illness, no debts that might have driven him to run. By all accounts, his life was normal. And yet, in the middle of this very ordinary life, something extraordinary happened. Something that would transform him from a man of flesh and blood into a figure of legend. Those close to him described him as curious, but not reckless, the kind of person who liked to ask questions about history, about the way the world worked. Perhaps it was that curiosity that made his story feel almost believable, as if he had somehow found a doorway to the very past he was so fascinated with. And so, when the moment came, when Samuel supposedly slipped into another time, it didn't just shock strangers. It shook his entire community because they knew the man at the center of it. To them, he wasn't a rumor. He was real. It began like any other day, which is often the case with stories like this. Samuel woke early, carried out his routine, and spoke to neighbors in passing. Nothing about his behavior suggested that anything unusual was about to unfold. There were no warnings, no signs of distress, no hints that he was planning to vanish. According to witnesses, Samuel was last seen walking through town in the late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the streets. He seemed calm, collected, and in no hurry. Some people later recalled that he paused more than once, looking around as though something had caught his attention. But no one thought much of it at the time. Then, in a moment that still defies explanation, Samuel stepped into an alleyway. And that was it. He never came out the other side. No one saw him run. No one heard a struggle. It was as if he had simply walked out of the present and into somewhere else entirely. What makes this story even more haunting is what came after. Rumors began spreading almost immediately. Some claimed Samuel had mentioned feeling as if time was bending in the days before his disappearance. Others swore he had spoken of vivid dreams about the year 1872 as though he had already seen it before. Whether those claims were true or just inventions after the fact, no one can be certain. What is certain is this: Samuel never returned. His footsteps vanished into silence, leaving behind only questions that no search could answer. The moment it became clear that Samuel had vanished, panic swept through the community. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered quickly, certain that he must have taken a wrong turn or fallen ill nearby. At first, the search was casual. People calling his name, checking alleyways, knocking on doors. But as the hours passed with no sign of him, that casual concern hardened into fear. By nightfall, entire groups of volunteers were combing the area. Lanterns lit the streets, and people scoured every corner of the town and the surrounding countryside. They dragged the river, checked abandoned buildings, and questioned travelers who might have passed through. But Samuel was nowhere. No footprints, no discarded belongings, nothing. Authorities soon joined in, launching an official investigation. Posters were put up, descriptions were spread, and word traveled to neighboring towns. But despite the sheer number of eyes looking for him, not a single lead surfaced. It was as though Samuel had simply evaporated from existence. What unsettled the searchers most was how abrupt it all was. One moment, Samuel was a man walking among them. The next, he was gone. No struggle, no evidence, no witness who could say with certainty what happened in that alley. The harder they searched, the deeper the mystery seemed to grow. In time, frustration began to replace hope. Some whispered that he must have staged his disappearance. Others believed something darker, that he had been taken or pulled into something far beyond their understanding. Whatever the truth, the immediate search only confirmed one thing. Samuel was not coming back easily, and perhaps not at all. As the days turned into weeks, the search for Samuel uncovered little. Yet what was found only deepened the mystery. Neighbors remembered odd details that at the time had seemed meaningless, but now felt chilling. A few people swore they had heard him speak about a door in time just days before he disappeared. Others recalled his fascination with old maps and history books, as if he was preparing himself for another era. But the strangest detail came from the alleyway itself. According to some reports, the ground showed faint impressions, as if Samuel had indeed stepped forward, but the footprints ended abruptly, mid-stride, with no continuation on the other side. It looked as though he had walked straight into nothingness. Investigators dismissed it, blaming bad lighting and uneven ground, but for those who saw it, the image was unforgettable. There were also scattered reports from nearby towns. People claimed to have seen a man who looked eerily like Samuel, but dressed in clothes far too old-fashioned for the time. Was it mistaken identity, wishful thinking, or could it have been him, somehow appearing in another place, or another time? And then there were the unanswered questions. If Samuel had run away, why leave behind everything he owned? Why abandon his family and friends with no explanation? If he had been kidnapped, where were the signs of a struggle? And if he truly had stepped into another time, how and why him? The more people tried to answer these questions, the more impossible the story became. Every clue pointed in a different direction, and none of them led to a logical conclusion. It was as if the world had decided to erase Samuel, leaving behind only fragments of a story too strange to believe and too compelling to ignore. When a story defies logic, people try to fill in the blanks. And in Samuel's case, the theories have been just as mysterious as his disappearance itself. Some insist it was nothing more than a well-planned escape. They argue Samuel might have wanted to start a new life elsewhere, far away from the people who knew him. Maybe he carried secrets no one ever discovered, debts, relationships, or troubles that forced him to vanish. But this theory struggles with one fact. Samuel left behind everything. His belongings, his home, and even his modest savings. If he had run away, he hadn't prepared for survival. Others believe he may have been the victim of a crime, perhaps lured into the alley and taken without a trace. But investigators found no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, and no ransom demands. It was almost too clean, too perfect, as if he had been plucked from the world without leaving a single thread behind. Then comes the theory that has fueled the legend for decades: time travel. Samuel's own fascination with the past, the rumors that he spoke about doors in time, and the strange ending of his footprints gave people reason to believe he might have somehow crossed into another era. Supporters of this theory even point to those strange reports of a man resembling Samuel, dressed as though he belonged in the late 1800s. To them, it wasn't coincidence, it was evidence. And finally, there's the more unsettling idea that Samuel's disappearance wasn't by choice and wasn't by crime, but something far stranger. Some whisper about experiments gone wrong or natural anomalies, portals, rips in reality, events science hasn't yet explained. The kind of thing we hear about in folklore but never expect to see in real life. The truth is, no single theory explains it all. Each one solves part of the puzzle, but none of them fit neatly. And that's what keeps Samuel's story alive. The possibility that what happened to him lies beyond what we think we know. Today, Samuel's story remains one of those unsolved mysteries that refuses to fade away. No body was ever found, no evidence ever surfaced, and no confession or explanation has ever brought closure. It lingers in the space between legend and reality, too strange to accept, but too detailed to ignore. In his hometown, his disappearance became part of local lore. Older generations passed the story down like a warning, while newer ones repeat it with fascination, wondering how something like this could ever happen. Some treat it as nothing more than a folk tale. Others, however, still believe Samuel truly slipped through time, and they continue to search for proof, combing through old newspapers and records from the 1800s to see if a man like him suddenly appeared. The authorities long ago closed the case, unable to move forward with no evidence. To them, it's a cold file gathering dust. But for many, especially those drawn to mysteries that resist explanation, Samuel's disappearance is more alive than ever. It's debated in books, on forums, in documentaries, and in late-night conversations where people admit they're not sure what reality is truly capable of. What's most haunting is that Samuel has no ending. Without a body, without closure, his story remains suspended in time, much like the man himself. And maybe that's why it continues to captivate us, because we may never know if he chose to leave, was taken, or really did cross into another era. Samuel's disappearance is more than just an unsolved case. It's a reminder of how fragile our understanding of the world really is. We like to believe that everything has a reason, that every mystery has an answer waiting to be uncovered. But then a story like this comes along and forces us to wonder, what if some answers lie beyond our reach? What if the impossible is closer than we think? Was Samuel a man who carefully planned his escape from an ordinary life? Was he the victim of a crime so well hidden that no trace was ever left behind? Or did he truly step into another time, vanishing into 1872, never to return? The truth may never be known, and maybe that's what makes his story so haunting. But what do you think really happened to him? Was this a case of cold logic, or something far stranger than logic could ever explain? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.